What if the child sewing your clothes had more power to expose corruption than any executive in a boardroom? When billionaire Sebastian Hale knocked on the door of a rundown apartment to collect late rent, he expected excuses. Instead, he found a 10-year-old girl with bandaged fingers, sitting alone at a sewing machine, and in that moment, everything changed. But what started as a simple act of kindness soon unraveled into a decades-old corporate scandal, a hidden bloodline, and a reckoning no one saw coming. This isn't just a story of privilege and poverty, it's about truth buried beneath thread and silence, and a girl who stitched together a legacy no one could erase. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe to follow more powerful stories like this, where injustice meets courage, and one voice can transform an entire system. And tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone uncover a truth that changed everything? Your voice matters, and sharing these stories helps shine a light on the ones still fighting to be seen. The elevator groaned as it climbed the 4 floors of Havenwood Complex. Sebastian Hale tapped his Italian leather shoe against the floor, impatient. The building reeked of mold and stale grease, and the flickering hallway lights only fueled his irritation. "This place should have been condemned," he muttered. His assistant had suggested a property manager handle overdue tenants, but Sebastian insisted. The board meeting was days away, and he needed ammo to show why rent hikes were overdue. Unit 3B. The file said Brooks, L, 2 weeks past due. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, firmer this time. A clatter of something metal fell inside, followed by silence. Then, the door creaked open just enough for a child's face to appear. She was small, maybe 10. Her eyes were dark and unreadable, intelligent, tired, and too still for her age. She didn't speak. "I'm looking for Lena Brooks," Sebastian said. The girl stepped aside, revealing a cramped apartment. Dust motes floated in shafts of weak sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of fabric dye and camphor. In the corner, an old sewing machine whirred on a crate. "She's resting," the girl said, walking back to the machine without offering her name. "Can I help you with something?" Sebastian hesitated, thrown by the formality in her voice. "I'm here about the rent. It's 2 weeks late." Without flinching, she reached into a wooden box, retrieved a crumpled envelope, and handed it to him. "It's only half," she said. "I'll have the rest by tomorrow night. Mrs. Patterson paid for 3 dresses. He opened the envelope. Worn bills, mostly 5s and 1s. "Who are you?" he asked. Amara Brooks." Sebastian's gaze swept the apartment. The walls were stained, pipes dripped in the kitchen sink, but on a narrow folding table, swatches of bright fabric were arranged with meticulous care. Dozens of child-sized dresses, each detailed with lace or embroidery, hung from makeshift hooks. He looked back at her, fingers wrapped in band-aids, posture stiff with discipline. "Where's your father?" "I don't have one," she said simply. Sebastian blinked. "And your mother? She let you stay home from school." "She has pneumonia. And no, she didn't let me. I chose to." Amara returned to the sewing machine. "The money doesn't wait. School does." Her needle pierced fabric with rhythmic precision. She didn't look up again. Sebastian stood awkwardly. "You shouldn't be doing this alone." "I'm not alone," she said. "I'm working." The confidence in her voice unsettled him. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less composure than this child had. "Why didn't you call someone?" he asked, softening. "I did," Amara said, her eyes fixed on the needle. "You came." A dry, violent cough erupted from behind a tattered curtain separating the living space from a small bedroom. Amara didn't react, just paused long enough to listen, then continued sewing. Sebastian stepped toward the curtain, instinctively, but Amara spoke without turning. "She's sleeping. The medicine makes her sleep longer." He glanced at the thin walls, the outdated radiator, the small space that clearly hadn't seen a repair in years. His voice dropped. "You live here alone, all day. I make food, clean, sew." She shrugged. "I wait for her to get better." Another cough, deeper, worse. Sebastian suddenly felt the weight of his tailored wool coat. It didn't belong here. He didn't belong here. He checked his watch. "I'll return in a few days. Tell your mother, you don't have to come back," Amara interrupted. "The rent will be paid." He looked at her again, not with judgment now, but with something he hadn't felt in years, uncertainty. "I'll come back anyway," he said, "just in case." The Tesla's engine purred silently as Sebastian navigated out of the crumbling neighborhood. He usually filtered these streets out, saw them as future development zones, not places where people lived. He glanced in the rearview mirror. That building, Havenwood, was just another line item on a quarterly report. Unit 3B, delinquent tenant, worth a warning, nothing more. But that girl was a variable he couldn't explain. Amara Brooks, sewing like her life depended on it, speaking like she'd seen things most adults couldn't handle. He should have felt proud. She had hustle, drive, independence. But all he felt was discomfort. Why had he never noticed anyone living in those units before? Why did her eyes make him feel exposed? His phone buzzed. He didn't answer. 2 days later, mid-meeting with investors at Hale Industries, Sebastian's phone vibrated again. He ignored it until he saw the name, Mercy General Hospital. He frowned and excused himself. "Mr. Hale?" the nurse said when he answered. "We're calling about a patient, Lena Brooks. Her daughter listed you as the emergency contact." He froze. Why would she? She said you're the property owner." Sebastian was in his car before he finished the sentence. At the hospital, he found Amara sitting on a molded plastic bench. Her dress was clean but wrinkled, her braids slightly undone. Her eyes were rimmed red, but still carried that same quiet steel. "They won't let me see her," she said before he could ask. "They said I need an adult, so I gave them your number." He blinked, thrown. "To you," she continued, "you're the landlord. But to me, you're the only adult who knocked on our door." Sebastian stared at her, speechless, and somewhere in his chest a crack formed. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General buzzed faintly overhead, casting a cold pallor across the worn linoleum floors. Sebastian Hale sat rigid in a chair that was too small for his frame, across from Amara, who stared straight ahead. "She's still in the ICU," the nurse had said. "Stable, but very weak." Now, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Amara spoke first. "If she stays more than 3 days, and they'll come." "Who will?" Sebastian asked, shifting to face her. "Social services. They tried once before. I had to lie, said my aunt was coming." Her voice didn't tremble, but her fingers fidgeted with the frayed hem of her sleeve. "This time, I don't think I'll be fast enough." Sebastian exhaled. He hadn't come to play the hero, but the image of Amara in that apartment, hunched over the sewing machine, burned in his mind. "You don't have anyone else?" he asked. "No," she said, "just her. And now, you." The next morning, as Sebastian sipped bad hospital coffee, a woman approached wearing slacks, a grey blouse, and an official badge clipped to her collar. "Diana Morris," she said, offering a firm handshake. "Child Protective Services." Amara's eyes widened. She backed toward the corridor. "I'd like to speak with Miss Brooks privately," Diana said. "She's not going with you," Sebastian blurted. Diana arched an eyebrow. "And you are?" "He's my uncle," Amara interjected quickly. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "He's here for me." Sebastian stared at her. Diana folded her arms. "Mr. Hale, Sebastian Hale," he replied, regaining composure. "I own the building she lives in. Her mother asked me to watch over her while she's sick. That request would need to be documented," Diana said flatly. "We'll need to investigate whether the child is in a safe environment." "She is," Sebastian said firmly. "With me." "I'm sure you understand, Mr. Hale," Diana said. "We'll be conducting a home visit today." Amara's eyes darted to him. "Please don't let them take me." He nodded, heart pounding. By late afternoon, Sebastian stood in the hospital hallway with Martin Goldstein, his longtime lawyer and occasional conscience. Martin was short, round, and looked perpetually under-caffeinated. "You did what?" Martin asked, voice hushed and incredulous. "I told child services I'm taking temporary custody." Sebastian, Martin hissed, rubbing his temples. You're single, male, no parenting history, the optics alone. I don't care about optics, Sebastian snapped. She was about to be taken into a system she clearly doesn't trust. You didn't see her face. Martin sighed. Look, I'll draw up the paperwork, but it's going to raise questions, especially with your enemies watching. I'm not abandoning her, Sebastian said. You better not, Martin muttered, pulling out his phone, because now you're on the hook. For real. That night, Sebastian unlocked the door to his penthouse and let Amara step inside first. The elevator had opened directly into his home, an open concept space bathed in city light, all glass, steel, and polished concrete. Amara didn't move. You okay? He asked. She stood just inside the door, clutching her small backpack. It's big, she said quietly. He turned on more lights. You can choose any room, the guest wing's down there. I'd rather stay near the door, she replied, eyes still scanning. You're safe here, Amara. She looked at him, as if searching his face for proof. Do you lock your doors? Yes. She nodded once. Then I'll be fine. Sebastian watched from the kitchen as Amara, finally changing into pajamas, settled onto the massive leather sectional, her backpack still gripped in her arms. Why don't you take the bed? He asked. I sleep better near the window, she said. He didn't push. Instead, he brought her a glass of warm milk and set it on the table beside her. Thank you, she murmured. But I'll be up early. I still have 2 dresses to finish. You don't have to worry about that right now. I do, she said. If I don't keep working, I forget who I am. Sebastian didn't have a response. She sounded so much like someone twice her age, and yet she still clutched a worn plush rabbit in her lap when she thought he wasn't looking. As he walked down the hall, he paused to glance back. She was watching the city lights, wide-eyed, but not with awe, with calculation. She was already thinking ahead. And for the first time in years, Sebastian Hale felt something shift deep in his chest, an unfamiliar ache of responsibility. Amara was already up when Sebastian walked into the kitchen. It wasn't even 6 a.m. She sat at the far end of the counter, hand-stitching a tiny row of pearls onto the neckline of a sky blue dress. Her backpack was open, a sketchbook, and a fabric swatch poking out. You didn't sleep? He asked. I slept, just not long, she said without looking up. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter. You don't have to keep doing this, Amara. You're not at the apartment anymore. Yes, I do, she replied, lifting her eyes. Mrs. Patterson already paid a deposit. If I don't deliver today, she'll go to someone else. Sebastian rubbed the bridge of his nose. We have money. I'll cover anything your mom needs. It's not about the money, she said sharply. It's about trust. There was something unnervingly adult in her voice, something that shamed him. He had contracts worth millions waiting on his desk, but none that carried the weight she gave to a few pieces of fabric and lace. He didn't respond. He simply nodded and pulled out his phone to call Martin. If this girl was staying with him, even temporarily, he needed legal footing, and fast. Later that afternoon, Sebastian and Amara sat in a posh downtown law office across from Diana Morris, the child services officer who had returned for her evaluation. Martin Goldstein leaned forward, legal documents neatly stacked between them. Amara sat up straight in her chair, her dress pristine, her tone measured. I want to stay with Mr. Hale, she said clearly. Diana raised an eyebrow. You understand that foster care could offer stability, supervision. They won't let me work, Amara interrupted. If I don't finish what I started, we lose our clients, our apartment. I lose my name in the book. What book? Martin asked, curious. The ledger, she explained. My mother kept a book of clients and deliveries. I'm in it now. That matters. Sebastian looked over at her, both surprised and strangely proud. Diana turned to him. Mr. Hale, do you intend to continue allowing her to work? I intend to let her continue what gives her dignity, he said, and I intend to keep her safe. Diana considered that. Temporary custody will require home inspections and updates. I'll need access to your residence. You'll have it. he said without hesitation. When Diana stood to leave, Amara followed her out, but paused in the doorway. "Thank you," she whispered, not to Diana, to Sebastian. Across the street, in the shadow of a silver sedan, Victoria Vance lowered her camera. She had followed Sebastian here out of instinct. The rumors had reached her desk. Sebastian Hale had taken in a child, a tenant no less. Uncle Gregory would be livid, she thought. She smiled without humor. Victoria snapped one more photo. Sebastian holding the door open for Amara, her small frame nearly swallowed. By the glass tower's entrance, she didn't need to fabricate a scandal. All she had to do was wait. Back at the penthouse, Sebastian sat with a stack of property records, poring over maintenance and rental histories of Havenwood. Something wasn't adding up. "Your unit hasn't had a rent increase in 5 years, he said aloud, as Amara worked quietly nearby. "My mom had an arrangement," she said, "with the man who owned it before you. She mended suits for free." Sebastian blinked. "Your mom did. Tailoring for management?" Amara nodded. "He liked her work, said it reminded him of his grandmother's hands." Sebastian sat back. "Do you know if she ever worked for Hale Industries?" "I think so," Amara said slowly. "She had a badge with your company's name on it when I was younger, but she never talked about it. Do you still have it? I'll look." She returned a few minutes later with a small sewing box. Inside, amid thimbles and tangled thread, was a faded ID badge with a familiar logo, and a younger Lena Brooks smiling on the laminate card. Sebastian stared at it. The date was nearly 2 decades ago. That night, while the city sparkled below, Amara sat in the quiet of the guest room she refused to sleep in and opened her school notebook. Page after page contained rough sketches, business names, and bits of conversation she'd overheard. Some from Sebastian's phone calls, others from her mother over the years. She taped a newspaper clipping on one page, a ribbon tag with her mother's name on another. She began writing down details about the original owner of Havenwood, about the missing contract papers her mom once mentioned in a whisper. She didn't fully know what it all meant yet, but she knew this. Her mother had chosen that apartment for a reason. She had sewn in silence for years, and now it was Amara's turn to thread the needle. Outside her door, Sebastian paused. He could hear the soft scratch of pencil on paper. He didn't disturb her. He didn't realize she was already building the case that would eventually tear everything down. The conference room at Hale Industries was pristine. Glass walls, a long mahogany table, and the skyline stretching beyond the 40th floor like a crown. The board meeting had just begun, but the tension in the air already felt thick as velvet. Victoria Vance stood confidently at the head of the table, her grey pantsuit pressed so sharply it looked starched into armor. Her voice rang with deliberate calm. "There's a concern we need to address," she began, clicking the remote. The screen behind her lit up with a grainy photo, Sebastian walking beside Amara outside the law office. Gasps fluttered around the table. "Mr. Hale has taken in a minor, a tenant from one of our underperforming buildings. There is no formal relationship, no guardianship approved by the court, and certainly no public explanation." Sebastian didn't flinch. "This behavior raises concerns about judgment and risk management," Victoria continued. "For the sake of corporate integrity, I recommend Mr. Hale take a temporary leave until these matters are clarified." A murmur rippled through the board. Sebastian leaned forward, voice calm but ice-cold. "Is that all, Victoria? Or will you also be suggesting I fire myself?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That depends on how long you plan to let this situation linger." That afternoon, Sebastian stormed into Martin Goldstein's office, the door slamming behind him. "She's coming for me," he said. "Victoria's using Amara to stage a coup." Martin didn't look surprised. "She's been waiting for a reason. You just handed her one. She's accusing me of being unstable, for helping a child." He threw his hands in the air. Martin tapped his pen against his desk. "It's not about the child. It's about the power shift. You're disrupting the narrative she's built." Sebastian sat heavily. What if she's right? Martin looked up sharply. Do you believe that? Sebastian hesitated. She's planning to... Question your fitness, Martin said. Psych evaluations, leaked stories, maybe worse. If she can paint you as unhinged, she wins. Then we fight back. With what? Martin asked. Sebastian didn't know yet, but something inside him whispered that Amara had already started to build a case far stronger than anything he could fabricate. The hallway outside Lena Brooks's hospital room smelled of disinfectant and lemon-scented floor wax. Sebastian stood still for a moment before knocking softly and entering. She was awake, barely, her frame swallowed in the sheets, eyes sunken but alert, an oxygen tube curved around her face. He approached slowly. Lena, he said, unsure of what he meant to follow it with. Her gaze flicked toward him, then down to her hands. Her fingers moved slowly, as though reaching for something that wasn't there. I didn't expect to see you again, she whispered. Sebastian swallowed. Amara, she's safe. She's staying with me. Her eyes flicked back to his. No alarm, no gratitude, just silence. Then faintly she nodded. She's strong, he said. Too strong for 10. Lena managed a faint smile. That's what scared me. He pulled the chair closer. Did you ever work for my father? Her face tightened. You were on an old ID badge from Hale Industries. I worked there, she said, until I was forgotten. The pause between her words hung like broken thread. Tell her. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Tell her to look in the box. She'll know what to do. Back at the penthouse, Amara sat on the carpet with her school notebook, the sewing box open beside her. Sebastian stood above her, Lena's cryptic message echoing in his ears. What is that? He asked. My notebook, she said without looking up. I've been writing things down. She turned to a specific page, page 27, and held it up. On it were taped copies of old contracts, a faded photo of Gregory Hale shaking hands with workers outside a warehouse, and a name circled in red, Lena Brooks. Sebastian froze. My mother worked there, Amara said. She wasn't just a seamstress. She helped build something important. He reached for the notebook, but Amara didn't let go. She said it wasn't safe before, but now she wants me to finish what she started. Sebastian sank into the couch, stunned. You're saying, my father, he promised people shares, she said. Workers like her, but they never got anything, just silence. He looked down at the page again, names, signatures, dates, and at the bottom of the page, a name he hadn't expected, Victoria Vance, legal counsel. It was well after midnight when Sebastian walked into his father's private archive, tucked away in the west wing of the Hale estate. The room smelled of dust, varnish, and arrogance. He searched shelf after shelf until he found it, a dusty leather binder labeled Founding Contracts, 1995. Inside was a paper trail of broken promises, agreements made and then rescinded. Among them, a page that bore the unmistakable signature of Lena Brooks, and beside it, a second version, nearly identical, but with names erased and terms altered. The second document bore a different signature, Victoria Vance. Sebastian stood frozen. The truth wasn't just hidden, it had been rewritten. He gathered the originals, slid them into a folder, and walked out with a single thought forming in his mind. They tried to bury the truth. But Amara, his Amara, was about to unearth it all. The boardroom of Hale Industries was unusually quiet. 12 members, all in polished suits and guarded expressions, sat around the long obsidian table. The tension thickened as Victoria Vance tapped her laptop and a screen flickered to life behind her. Before we begin, she said with a clipped voice, I must present evidence of a potential liability. The screen displayed photos. Sebastian exiting his penthouse with Amara, sitting beside her in a law office lobby, walking with her hand in his at the hospital. Murmurs rippled. This child, Victoria continued, has no legal relation to Mr. Hale, yet she resides with him unsupervised, unvetted. This puts the board and the company at risk. Sebastian didn't blink. You're framing empathy as misconduct. I'm framing recklessness as what it is, she replied coolly. And I propose a temporary suspension from executive authority pending investigation. Several heads nodded. Then Sebastian rose. I'd like to respond, he said, opening his briefcase, with evidence. Sebastian clicked the remote. A scanned image of an old contract filled the screen. 28 years ago, Gregory Hale, my father, signed a legally binding agreement with 50 factory workers, most of them black, promising equity shares in the Hale Industries clothing division. He clicked again. A second image appeared. The same contract, altered, names erased, terms changed. At the bottom, the unmistakable signature of Victoria Vance. Gasps replaced murmurs. These are the original and modified contracts, Sebastian continued. Lena Brooks, one of the original signees, kept a copy my father never knew she had. Victoria stood. This is fabricated. They're notarized, Sebastian cut her off, and I have 2 more copies from other original employees who were threatened into silence. Silence fell. This board, Sebastian said, has been built on a lie, and the one who preserved that lie is the very person calling me unfit to lead. Victoria's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Sebastian let that silence speak. Victoria stormed into the hallway moments later, trailed by 2 stunned board members. Behind them, the press had already caught wind of the internal turmoil. Martin Goldstein met Sebastian outside the conference room. That was nuclear. I didn't come to play defense, Sebastian said, voice low. I came to burn down the illusion. Back inside, the remaining board members huddled. Whispers of federal violations, legal exposure and media leaks stirred like ash in wind. This is going public, one director said. We'll be crucified, another muttered. Martin stepped forward, calm and clear. Mr. Hale has voluntarily turned over all evidence to the Department of Justice. He's not hiding anything. But Vance, someone started. Will face prosecution, Martin interrupted. And if this board wishes to survive, I suggest you start asking the same of yourselves. By unanimous vote, Victoria Vance was placed on indefinite leave, pending full investigation. Victoria's office was quiet when Sebastian entered. She sat behind her desk, eyes blank, hands folded tightly. You think you've won? No, he said. I think I've finally seen clearly. You're protecting that child like she's your own. He didn't respond. Victoria laughed bitterly. You don't even know what that means. I know enough, Sebastian said. Enough to know what this company stole. Enough to know it won't keep stealing on my watch. You'll ruin Hale's name. She hissed. Sebastian stepped forward, placing a folder on her desk. Hale was already ruined. I'm just giving it a chance to be rebuilt, honestly. As he turned to leave, Victoria opened the folder. Inside were signed affidavits from former employees, notarized pages, and a simple resignation letter with her name at the bottom, pre-drafted. Her fingers curled around it. They'll eat you alive. Let them try, he said. I've got something they don't. She looked up. Truth. That night, Sebastian and Amara sat on the floor of the penthouse living room. The skyline glowed beyond the glass, but inside it was quiet. Amara held a small box in her lap, the one her mother had asked Sebastian to retrieve. Inside were photos, notes, a yellowed birth certificate. Sebastian unfolded it slowly. His name wasn't listed, but Gregory Hale's was. He looked at Amara. She was watching him, her small face still and unreadable. I didn't know, he whispered. I figured, she said softly, but I think my mom wanted you to. He touched the edge of the certificate, heart pounding. I can take a test, he said. Make it official. Amara nodded once. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them away. I want to, he said, more than anything. In that moment, the empire he'd built meant nothing, but the girl sitting beside him, his daughter, meant everything. The flashing lights of cameras blinked across the steps of Hale Industries, where a podium had been set. A banner read, "A new chapter begins." Sebastian Hale stepped forward, flanked by Lena Brooks in a wheelchair and Amara at her side. Sebastian adjusted the microphone. His voice was firm, but low. For decades, my company, my family, benefited from the labor, creativity, and trust of workers who were promised partnership but given silence. One of those voices belonged to Lena Brooks. The others were lost beneath paperwork and corporate lies. He looked to Lena, who nodded slowly. Sebastian continued, "Today we begin repairing that breach, not with words, but with actions." A reporter called out, "Mr. Hale, is it true Amara Brooks is your daughter?" Sebastian looked down at Amara, who met his gaze with quiet confidence. "Yes," he said, "she is, and I intend to be the father she deserves, and the leader this company needs." The crowd murmured, some in awe, others in discomfort, but the truth had finally been spoken aloud. Later that week, in a conference room filled with legal documents and community leaders, Sebastian signed over 40% of Hale Industries' assets to form the Coleman Reparation Fund. Martin Goldstein explained to reporters, "The fund will offer retroactive financial compensation to the descendants of the original factory workers and full scholarships for students from marginalized communities interested in fashion, entrepreneurship, or law." Sebastian addressed the attendees. "This isn't charity. This is owed. What was stolen must be returned." A former factory seamstress stood, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd live to see someone admit it." Amara sat beside her mother, fingers intertwined with Lena's frail but recovering hand. Lena whispered, "This is yours too, baby. You started it." Amara shook her head gently. "No, you kept the thread alive. I just followed it." In the quiet of the hospital recovery room, Lena spoke more each day. Her voice was still raspy, but stronger. One afternoon, Amara arrived with a small sketchbook in her bag. "I brought these," she said, laying them out on Lena's blanket. "They're my newest ones, for uniforms mostly, simple but strong." Lena flipped through the pages slowly, pride rising in her throat. "They're good," she said softly, "better than mine at your age." "You think so?" Amara smiled shyly. Lena nodded. "But you have something I never did." Amara looked confused. "You have a place to show them, a name that will be heard." Amara paused. "Because of him? Because of you," Lena replied, squeezing her daughter's hand. He just finally saw what was already there. Outside the room, Sebastian listened from the hallway, his eyes misting. Back at the Hale estate, Sebastian opened one of the last locked drawers in his father's old office. Inside was a thick portfolio, yellowed pages, some folded, some pinned. Each sheet bore the same style, clean lines, elegant shapes, practical stitching, and in the corner of every design, a single name, once scratched out in pencil but still faintly visible, L. Brooks. He spread the pages out across the desk. These were not just garments, they were Lena's blueprints. They had been used for decades as the foundation for Hale Industries' signature look. He called Amara in. "These are hers," he said, voice hoarse. "They always were." Amara moved to the table slowly, her fingers brushing the paper like sacred cloth. "She never told me," she whispered. "She didn't want you carrying her disappointment," Sebastian replied. "She wanted you to build something new." Amara straightened. "Then that's exactly what I'll do." Weeks later, the apartment Amara once sewed in by candlelight was alive with laughter, chalk dust, and creativity. Tables lined the walls, mannequins stood in corners, and sunlight poured through clean windows. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "The Brooks Studio for Design and Empowerment." Amara, in a simple white dress she stitched herself, stood before a room of young girls holding sketchbooks and fabric swatches. "This used to be my home," she began. "I learned to sew here. I learned to fight here. And now it belongs to all of you." Lena watched from the back, tears in her eyes. Sebastian stood beside her, a proud hand on her shoulder. The girls looked around, wide-eyed and eager. "Today," Amara continued, "we don't just stitch fabric. We stitch our names into history." The class erupted in applause, and for the first time, Amara smiled, not out of survival, but from joy. The courtroom was still, except for the rustling of papers and the occasional scratch of a pen. Victoria Vance sat expressionless at the defense table, her once imposing presence dimmed beneath fluorescent lights and a grey suit that now seemed more prison-bound than powerful. The judge's voice echoed, "Found guilty of fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud minority employees." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victoria blinked slowly but showed no emotion as the sentence was read, 9 years in federal prison. From the gallery, Sebastian Hale sat beside Amara and Lena. The verdict wasn't cause for celebration, but for reckoning. Amara whispered, "Do you think she ever thought she'd get caught?" "She thought no one would speak," Sebastian said. "She underestimated you." The cameras outside swarmed. Headlines erupted within minutes. Empire falls. Vance sentenced in landmark corporate justice case. For once, the truth had outlived the lie. A few months later, in the newly renovated Brooks Studio for Design and Empowerment, Amara sat at the head of a long table with bolts of fabric stacked high and sketchbooks spread wide. 10 girls, all from the surrounding neighborhoods, huddled around her, sketching, laughing, pinning swatches to mannequins. One girl raised her hand. "Miss Amara, what's the most important stitch?" Amara smiled. "The one that holds when everything else falls apart." The room giggled. Lena watched from the doorway, stronger now, walking, with the help of a cane. Sebastian stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes glassy. "She was always this way," Lena said. "I just never thought the world would finally see it." "She didn't just survive," Sebastian replied. "She built." The girls weren't just learning to sew, they were learning to stand, to lead, to remember where they came from and reimagine where they could go. One late evening, as city lights blinked in the penthouse windows, Amara sat curled on the couch, sketchbook in hand. Sebastian poured tea and joined her, both of them quiet. Finally, Amara asked, "Do you think things would have been different if your dad had known about me?" Sebastian didn't answer right away. "I think he knew," he said softly, "and I think he chose to bury it." "Because of my mom?" she asked. "Because of me?" "Because of shame," he said, "and pride, and cowardice." Amara nodded slowly, tracing a line with her pencil. "You're not him," she said. "I've tried not to be." "Sometimes," she said, "I see parts of him in you, but I see more of Mom." That hit harder than she knew. Sebastian smiled. "Then I must be doing something right." They sat there, two worlds once divided, now side by side, at a gala held beneath the gleaming atrium of Hale Industries, now co-branded as Coleman and Williams Holdings. A crowd of donors, community leaders, and former factory workers gathered. A new plaque was unveiled, in honor of the forgotten hands that built this company and the future they inspired. Sebastian stood on stage, flanked by Lena and Amara. He wore no tie, no pin, just a quiet resolve. "This company," he said, "will no longer profit from silence. Today, we name the future with equal voices." He gestured toward Amara, now dressed in a blazer she designed herself. "She is not just my daughter, she is our new creative director for youth programs, because healing doesn't end with justice, it begins with vision." Thunderous applause erupted. For the first time, the company belonged to all the people who had built it. Weeks later, in a quiet brownstone just a few blocks from the old Havenwood complex, a new family gathered for dinner. The home was modest but warm, filled with books, fabric samples, and photographs old and new. Sebastian carved roast chicken, Lena lit candles, Amara placed napkins she'd stitched by hand. As they sat down, Lena raised her glass. "To second chances." "And true names," Amara added. They clinked glasses. After dinner, Sebastian handed Amara a wrapped box. "Your inheritance," he said with a wink. Inside was her mother's original sewing machine, restored and polished. Amara ran her hand across the worn edge. "You kept it?" she asked. "I found it in storage," he said. "Right where your mother left it." She looked up. "And where do we go now?" Wherever you want, Sebastian said. We build forward. Amara nodded. Then let's sow something the world's never seen. And so, as the city exhaled below and the night drew in around them, a family once scattered by secrets sat whole for the first time. Legacy, finally, was no longer built on power. It was stitched with love. What if the girl society ignored held the key to dismantling a generational lie? What if the man meant to evict her became the one to rewrite a legacy? Threads of the Forgotten isn't just a story. It's a mirror reflecting the power of courage, truth, and love in the face of systemic injustice. Now we ask you, how many stories like Amara's go untold in our own neighborhoods? And how far would you go if the truth risked everything you were raised to believe? Let us know in the comments, because your voice might just be the thread that connects it all. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional, truth-driven narratives that matter. And if you believe stories like these deserve to be seen and shared, share this video with someone who still believes in redemption, in justice, and in second chances. Let's build a community that values storytelling with purpose.